Spinning.
Or are we? Oh, hey,
Oh,
there we are.
and we're live.
Good. I timed it perfectly that time, I think.
It was just spinning around. I hit broadcast and it was just spinning around. Anyway,
Yeah.
Here we are. How you doing today, Jeff?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Happy Canada Day for yesterday.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's pronounced. Yeah, got it. Or you Aussies would be like Canada Day.
Yep, that's it. How do you say it? Canada Day? No, that's more Australian. Damn it.
You tried to sound Canadian and you just sounded more Australian than you already do. That's great.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Good stuff. That's a skill.
It's a good thing we're not here for comedy, mate. No one would ever watch this.
No, yeah. Tips welcome. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So today is Thursday, but we're doing FAQ Friday on Thursday because it's the 4th this weekend in America. So we're actually taking tomorrow off for the first time ever. So that's why we're doing FAQ Friday today.
Right.
So that's exciting.
If your first question is why is FAQ Friday on Thursday, that's why. Holiday for y'all tomorrow.
Exactly. I haven't quite worked y'all into a sentence yet. I've managed to type it, but being in Texas, it feels like you should say y'all. Still working.
I don't think you could pass it. You really need that drawl to be able to say it effectively.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I'll work on it.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, the longer you're in Texas, maybe the more it'll rub off on you. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe. So let's jump into some questions. I know you've got a few over there that you'd like to start with.
Yeah. I guess the first thing to start with, this question actually came a few weeks ago from a seller who said that they're talking to other brokers, and you should, by the way. Absolutely, just like getting your car fixed, you want to take it to a few shops to get different estimates and see who you like and see what their process is and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely do the rounds and talk to other brokers and go who you're comfortable with. But they said that the other brokers were quoting multiples like, oh, it's this brand, you can get like 6x for that. So we're, and they were floating around all of these crazy high multiples. And then, our process is using live market data that comes, but not any kind of internal algorithm or any kind of like guesswork or, we look at the live market data. We also know investor criteria because the buyers share what they want, and now we've shared it with you on what buyers want Wednesday. But buyers will come along multiple times a day saying, hey, I'm a buyer and this is my criteria and this is what I'm looking for. So we get that both. So we can merge those together and come up with a fairly decent idea of where we would expect to see offers. So that's how we approach it. And I guess realistically, a broker can tell you whatever they want. If they're trying to tell you that to gain your business, and then sign you onto some exclusivity contract and then list the business and come along and say, well, actually, all the offers are coming in at 3 times, not 6 times, like I had said, because of this, this, and this, but we're under exclusivity now. So you don't really have much of a choice, and you're really just taking their word for it. But the fact is, and I know that we've talked about this quite a bit, but a broker can tell you whatever they want, but it's not the broker who sets the price. It's not the broker that gets to decide that. If you're going with a brokerage that does use list prices, I would push back on that a little bit and say, why are you telling the world what my business is worth? Like, where is this coming from? But if they can say, like, oh, I can get you 6x for this, great, prove it. Don't take their word for it. Get them to provide the supporting data, the supporting market data that would prove that they can get a 6x for the business and none of the other brokerage firms can.
Or write a check.
Or buy it yourself if you think it's worth that much. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure. Deal.
Let's go. Yeah, you got it. Here are the keys. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's the interesting distinction there. It's like brokers aren't the ones buying the business. So keep that in mind.
Because we've been tracking the whole market for a long time now. We've seen a lot of it. We rely on public data, right? So not a lot of the other firms share. There's a few that do, but there's not a lot that share the actual terms behind the deal, and a lot of them can't because of because of non-disclosures and stuff. Like, we can't publicly talk about any of our deals really. There's a couple we can, but the details of them, that is. Now, what we have seen though, because we've been tracking the market for so long, monitoring and updating, what we do see consistently is an approach of some firms, and we're tracking 70 to 80 different brokerages, marketplaces, real estate agents that happen to have an e-commerce listing, all sorts of stuff, right? So what we commonly see is, when there's a list price used, is it's either, if it's a traditional brokerage, it's either below or above where the online e-commerce market sits. If it's within that range, then fine, it's probably going to sell for that. But what we see consistently is when the listing is marked up, like you were saying, maybe they pitch you on a 6x and they list it at 6x. What we see over time is they get beaten down on price. So the price actually changes over time. And we track this as well. This is one of the metrics we've been tracking internally, which is quite interesting. So like you said, when you're talking to people about value, we use a value range, a low, medium, and high. We say, here's what the market's telling us, right? And when we go to the market, when we go to sell the business, we don't use the list price, like you mentioned. We don't want to limit what a buyer would offer. But we also want to know that the offers that do come in are within the range. You mentioned this on Tuesday, I think we're talking about this. So that's how we approach it, right? It's not so much what we think it's worth or us pricing it. It's really what the market tells us, and it's our job to find you as many options as possible. So, like you said, if someone's quoting you a higher multiple than everyone else, prove it or buy it. I'd sell that to you today. Write me a check. We're done. It'd be interesting to see what they said. Maybe they wouldn't. That'd be great. But ask them what supports that. Not just, oh, you should get this because of this. Well, why? Show me why. And show me another deal like this that's closed for that, for example. If they could give you some data points, or someone else to talk to might be helpful as well that's actually done that. So it's not saying that that's not possible. Multiples are crazy things. There was a really great multiple paid this week for a business that I might just mention real quick, which is why list prices shouldn't be used. There was a company called Mirror here in the States that was acquired by Lululemon this week. I put it in our Facebook group.
Yeah, Vancouver company. Woo, right down the street.
Yeah.
Hi, Chip.
Right. So Lululemon paid $500 million for Mirror, which is a home workout, literally a mirror that helps you work out, right? So they paid $500 million for it. Now, the cool thing about this was that Mirror is projecting to do $100 million in revenue this year. So that's a 5x multiple on this year's projected revenue, not even what they're projecting in revenue this year. And the second best part was in the article I read. It said that in 2021, they expect to be break even or slightly profitable. So this is one reason why you don't want to use list price, because you might find a situation where that deal makes sense. And that deal makes sense to Lululemon for a whole bunch of reasons, right? Yeah. They have their customer before, during, and after buying workout gear from Lululemon. Makes total sense.
They've got all the distribution. They already have people lined up around the block to buy it.
Exactly. And they had a bit of spare change in the bank. They had $800 million in the bank, Lululemon did, at the time of purchase. So anyway, this is an extreme example. Of course, a small e-commerce brand is maybe not going to find that type of a result. But this is the point, that you don't want to set the price. You want the market to tell you. And if you go out to the right strategic partner, they may see value completely differently, and that's our
just
goal
take
too.
that same deal. Take that same deal. Like, we're talking astronomical figures here, $500 million revenue and $100 million, whatever. If you want to make that make sense, remove 2 zeros and still do the same math.
Yeah.
And still have, a non-profitable business that's doing 50,000, whatever. I mean, just like math it out with using a figure that makes more sense to you, and you'd still go, wow, they got a pretty sweet deal out of this. But Lululemon wanted to get this before anybody else could.
Yes.
And they know their customers extremely well, and they knew what they could do with this brand. So it almost didn't matter what they had done previously. They did what they could with what they had to work with. But what Lululemon has to work with is they have not only resources, but a significant amount of leverage to bring to the table. So they knew what they could do with it. And they saw something there that they wanted to, if they gambled and lost, it's not going to affect them that much. But they can afford to take that kind of risk. But they saw something that they didn't want any of their competitors to get a hold of.
And also, they were looking for that specific leverage. It's not like they were looking for a home workout company. They were looking for specific leverage. They had a high-priced product that's in the home. They also have a recurring subscription model. People on subscription. There's probably a whole lot of back-end data that they wanted access to as well. So that's value is driven by the market and by comparison. So I was talking to a friend this morning that's looking to go acquire something for his business, and he was saying, I was asking, well, who else is like this? Because he was having trouble getting through to the owner. I said, well, how big's the universe? Like, what are other options we have for acquisition here? And he's like, well, it's really this or nothing, right? He's not looking for 200 different businesses to acquire. He's looking for this one specific thing, and he'll pay differently for that because he has leverage for this deal. So, long way of saying, your business plays a significant piece, but the most important piece is who the buyers are and getting as much exposure to those type of buyers as possible. So for instance, if someone said, I can get you 6x for your business and I'm using my buyer pool, I'm going to email my buyer pool, I would call bullshit, right? For that, you need to, if you're going above market, you need to go find them. If they're not doing a heavy outreach program and maybe they have 100 other listings, there's no way they're going to be able to produce that result.
And there's another myth we can squash right there. Nobody has an exclusive buyer list.
Yeah.
Buyers are buyers. They're deal makers. They're on everybody's list. They're not special to anyone. So just, if somebody says, oh, my buyer pool has $1 billion, it's like, okay, but are they exclusively yours? Probably not. So is the right buyer on that list? Well, that's another story. And is that broker going to say, well, I will get you 6x and here's how I'm going to do it? I'll listen. But yeah, you're right. If they're just going to say, well, yeah, I post it and we'll just wait until 6x comes. Well,
the same is true when I've had conversations with sellers as well, that they say, oh, this other firm says they have the buyer for this. In deal making, we say one is none. We want more buyers than just one. One can fall over. Something can happen to them tomorrow. We want options. We want a lot of options when it comes to driving value, because then you just know. If you've seen 6
you
offers,
have the buyer for this, that's great, but do you have the best offer for it? How do you know?
Exactly.
If that buyer knows he's not competing with anybody, then that's pretty easy win for them. Yeah.
Context and work. If they're willing to give you context as far as how many offers they typically get and walk you through the offer, the work they do to generate those offers to find those buyers, then okay, maybe they're right.
Yeah. Well, that just creates a whole other conversation, I think, just popped into my mind too, about like why brokers tend to get a negative reputation sometimes, because you want your broker to work for you. That's their role. That's their job, to advise you and guide you through the market. And that takes work. It takes work to find the right buyer. It takes work to negotiate all the deal terms. It takes work to vet all of the buyers and make sure they've got proof of funds and make sure they've done deals before and that they have a plan in place for your brand. Like, we're not, but the ones that get the negative reputation are the ones that just, okay, here, thank you for all the information. Let's stick a listing up and maybe it'll sell in a year or two. Maybe it won't, but it doesn't really matter to me because I've got 400 listings and I know a few will sell every month and I'm happy with that.
Yeah,
that's great for them, not good for you. You want your broker to work for you and get you the best result. So, definitely shop around and listen to their process and find the one that you feel is going to get the maximum outcome for you. Or if you just need to get rid of it, then find the one that'll sell it the quickest, but it's not going to be 6X. More than likely. But anyway, cool. I think we've beaten that one to death. Anyway, the next one, I think it's probably more of a question for you because I would like to hear your answer on this about brand. He said brand reputation, but I think I want to say more about brand recognition, or like, let's say there's a brand that doesn't do loads in revenue and doesn't have like some insane profit margin, but in their target market, they are a recognizable brand. They've been around for a little bit. Like, what does that mean to a buyer, do you think? Like, does that really move the needle? Like, I know like age and authority, but if they're not hitting it out of the park on revenue, or they're not really, rocking these super high like profit margin, but they do have a strong brand presence in their market. Like, what does that to do anything?
Well, yeah, it depends. So it also depends on perspective. So an Amazon seller that thinks they have a good brand might mean we're ranked #1 and we have a brand name, but that's not really a brand. No. You want to prove that people are searching for your brand, buying your brand, and the easiest way to prove that is they're coming through our website. That we have a Facebook group and they're buying through here. We have an email list and they're buying through us. Amazon's a nice side bit to our business. That's the direct relationships that's valuable. I was reading another article about this morning, how large brands are trying to acquire D2C brands because they just can't figure out how to sell direct to consumer. So a brand that's interesting and could have more value has the customer. Like Mirror has the customer. They weren't profitable, but they had the customer. They had them on a recurring subscription, right? And a lot of them. So you need to prove it somehow. You can do this with third-party testing. You can do this with all sorts of things. But in the easiest way, I would say to do this is how are people finding you outside of Amazon? If you're an Amazon brand and you think you have a brand, well, how?
Yeah,
why?
I guess that's the difference. Like if you're an Amazon brand, if you are a brand that's on Amazon.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Because are people buying because you have that bestseller tag, or are they buying because they like XYZ brand and that's what they really wanted, whether it had that bestseller tag or not? Did they type your brand name into the search bar, or did they type in, best notebook or whatever, and they found you? Yeah.
I saw something funny a day or two ago. There was this influencer, fitness influencer, and you know how they're always promoting products and stuff. And it was like, I forget what the product was. It was like, oh, here's this great product. It was a video. And in the comment, it said, I bought this on Amazon. I was like, wait, what a minute, what? So you just go to Amazon and there it is? Are you fucking kidding me? It was so funny because people think, oh, this influencer's pushing my brand, but they didn't even mention the brand name. And you couldn't see it. So I don't know what brand it was.
Wow.
So that doesn't fly either. They need to be talking about your brand. We had a client. So here's a great example of a brand. We have a client right now. Some YouTubers picked up that product. It really worked for them. And they started talking about it. And pretty soon after, these got huge views. Like, they're really big YouTubers, got massive views. International distributors started knocking on the door. One of them placed a $2 million initial order. That's proof of a brand. Saying that we have the bestseller badge is not a brand. You need external proof that you have a brand.
But yeah, the distinction there: a brand on Amazon or a brand that also sells on Amazon, and yeah, prove that people are looking for your stuff. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Next question: UK company, US buyers. Is like, I guess there's a couple different ways to look at this. It's either a UK entity that sells on Amazon either globally or in the US as well or whatever. And I guess the first arm of that question is, do US buyers necessarily, cause I'm just saying US buyers because I mean, they make up the bulk of the buyers. So are they necessarily concerned with a UK entity? Do they care where the entity is placed? They're looking for taking over that brand, or does, and then the other part of that, I guess, would be to look at people who have a UK entity and they sell in the UK. Do they appeal to US buyers, and are they valued similarly? Are they valued the same? It's only water, I promise.
Yeah, straight vodka. This is a great question and something we get quite a lot. About half the deals we close are not US-based businesses, not US-based entities. So we deal with this quite a lot. There's a few ways to think about it, and I like how you set this up. So let's say, not even just UK, let's say you've got a foreign entity, meaning outside of the US, because I'm sitting in the US right now. We're both in North America, so this is where we are. So outside of here, or outside of the US specifically, but you sell in Amazon US. Amazon.com is the main place you sell, or that's a significant sales channel you have. This will still be interesting to US-based buyers, and like you said, they are the bulk of the buyer pool is US-based. In M&A worldwide, the bulk of the buyers in all categories, all ranges are US-based. So there is appetite, as we call it. There's interest in brands that sell into the US. So that will be, it depends on the business, the quality of the business and the size of the business, but there will generally be similar interest to that business. If it's a smaller business, say under $1 million in revenue, there may be a price decrease compared to a US entity, and that's simply because of funding options. Right? You need a cash buyer or buyer with their own funding. They can't use a third party like an SBA loan or something like that. If you're again, a UK or anywhere else, let's say UK, because you mentioned they were selling in the UK as well. So UK entities selling into the UK and maybe Europe, but not in the US. This could be interesting depending on the category and the size, again, for a buyer looking to get a foothold into the UK. So we have this quite often. Buyers will say, oh, by the way, if you find anything in the UK, we're looking to expand, but we don't want to go there from scratch. We'd prefer to get something that's already operating, right, and has a foothold there, and maybe they could cross-sell the products. We've had this in the sporting category before, where they had sporting products in the US, sporting brand, and they were looking at a sports brand in the UK, looking to acquire it, and then cross-promote the products. So bring the UK products over to the US and vice versa, but they were wanting that foothold. There's also, believe it or not, buyers in the UK and Europe. There's a lot of them that are actively looking to acquire brands. So you could also find someone locally. Some of the larger budget buyers we have are based in Europe and the UK. We were in Germany late last year negotiating an 8-figure deal in Germany with a German-based buyer and a German-based seller. And we were there. So there's a lot of buyers over there. So it's not exclusive. You don't have to just look in the US. The general thing we've seen across the market is there's a slight discount for a brand that's selling in Europe and the UK, But once we've found that we get into size, so if you're over 5 million in revenue, let's say, and you've got a meaningful business, a tightly focused brand in a specific category, that really opens up the door to larger buyers, and they see value differently than a typical e-commerce buyer. So yeah, does that answer the question, or do you have anything else to add?
I do have a follow-up to that, and that has to do with transferability, I guess. If you have, there's a couple of things that came up recently. I don't know if we can fit it all in the next 5 minutes. So I'll start with maybe the simpler of the two. If somebody is not US based, let's say they're UK or German or in France or whatever, and they have their brand of this, is there any difference in transferring that brand to a new owner if it's, you know, a German store versus a US store? Or did the different regions or the different managers of Amazon and the different marketplaces view things differently? Is it any more or less difficult, or is it fairly standardized?
Yes. Yes and no. In the US, it's the same. Whether it's a foreign entity or a local entity, transferring is very straightforward. You can do a brand transfer or an account transfer in the US. Same in the UK, it takes a little bit longer. Germany, however, is a completely different animal. We have an episode on our podcast about a transfer that took 302 days to close. And we interviewed our client. He was a German-based client on that deal. So you can go check that out. There are a couple different nuances with Germany specifically. It's incredibly hard to transfer the actual seller account in Germany. In fact, one of our previous clients a few years back tried to change the entity that he owned. So to change to his own entity, it took a year. So there's other ways. We typically do a brand transfer to another account in Germany, or they acquire the entity that owns that account, right? So there's a couple ways to do it. But yeah, it does make it a little bit different. And it's constantly changing too. There's new rules all the time. So yeah, we've dealt with it and we take it on a case by case basis. But yes, it will make it a little bit different on the transfer side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other question I had, which might be too messy to get into, is that I've talked to some sellers who have multiple entities. So they've got a UK entity that deals with UK and European sales. They've got Hong Kong / US LLC that handles their American stuff. And it's like, that's probably a pretty complicated thing to get into. There's probably no simple answer there. But if a buyer came along and says, yes, I want to buy it, what do you transfer? Like, man, like that's, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of works the same. The more complicated piece of that, I think we might have even talked about this one, is the financials. Getting the financials together is actually the harder piece than the transfer, because the transfer actually operates separately anyway. So it's, the transfer side is not so complicated. It's the verifying all the accounts and that can be,
because you're basically auditing two different companies, basically, right?
Yeah, and we've got to compile it all together in an easy to read format and also an easy to diligence format. So it just takes us longer to get it ready. Typically.
Got it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Got it. Well, that bumps us up to the half-hour mark.
Very nicely. And that was FAQ Friday on a Thursday. I don't know why I find that so funny. Maybe I'm drinking either.
I find it funny that you find it funny.
Excellent. That's perfect. So how can people reach out to us, Jeff?
Yeah, so sales at the FBA broker is by far the easiest one to use. I mean, let me know what your plans are. If you're thinking about selling now, if you're thinking about selling in the future, if you just want to check in to see what the market's doing or where you might be valued today so that you can have a starting point on creating kind of an exit plan. Whatever you want to chat about, send me an email, sales@thefbabroker.com, and we'll arrange a time to have a chat and see where we can help.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. For those of us in the US, have a great long weekend and happy 4th.
Feliz Cuatro.
For those in Canada, happy Canada Day for yesterday. And we'll see you all again next week. Awesome.
Sounds good. Bye for now.